Croeso I Just a Talking. Welcome to Just a Ticket, the Transport for Wales podcast. It's the start of our fourth series, and I'm really excited to be on one of our brand new tram trains with our Chief Executive, Mr. James Price. James, welcome to the podcast. First of all, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do at DFW?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm James Price. I'm Chief Executive of Transport for Wales. So that means I'm ultimately accountable for everything that we do, and I lead the organisation, which has got lots of very competent people and very technically specialist people who deliver everything that we do.
James, we're on one of our Class 398 tram trains, which is one of our brand new trains that hasn't been introduced to the network yet. Can you give us an update where we are with our new trains?
Yeah, so right across Wales, new trains are being introduced to the network. As you know, we have just over half of the new trains all across Wales. In North Wales, nearly every service run is a new train. In South Wales is a bit lower than that. But we have electric trains on the Valleys lines, and we have long distance CAF trains everywhere else. And with just over half of the new trains in service, and those trains being used on the most popular journeys, over 70% of people who journey with us are now finding themselves on a new train.
And what can they expect from, we're on this one, and it's a bigger upgrade from what people previously customers have had. What can customers expect in these brand new trains?
So it depends which train they're on, but all of the trains have been picked because they should fit the service group that people are using them on. So if they're on a long distance journey, they will find themselves on a more comfortable train than before, with a more comfortable seat, with air conditioning, quieter, obviously electric at seats. Where we need it, we'll have on-train food and drink. And it's just a nicer place to be. And the other thing, of course, that people should see as well is greater capacity. So people should be it should be easier to get a seat than it was in the past.
And having these new trains now is attracting more people to our network.
It is. So over the last 12 months, we have seen significant growth in the number of passengers using our network. We've seen significant growth in the satisfaction of those passengers with the services that we provide. We've obviously seen income in terms of ticket sales go up significantly as well. All of those in double digits, and nearly all of those metrics outperforming every other operator in the UK.
And it's not just about the benefit for our customers. It's also about providing resilience for us as an operator, so we can run our performance figures of running a network is better as well.
Yeah, so we want to run a network where we never cancel anything and everything is always on time. Obviously, that is the ambition. And in order to do that, we need to have enough trains, we need to have enough crew, and we need to have a reliable infrastructure. On the CVL, the infrastructure we own and operate ourselves. The infrastructure is getting more and more robust, which is good. The train numbers are increasing and the crew numbers are exactly where they ought to be. So we have not had to cancel a train for lack of crew for over a year now. And that's where we need to stay.
And you mentioned we've got over 50% of our brand new trains in. I think it's about 80 in total, another 68 to come in. So it's going to improve further as we introduce more and more over the coming months.
That's right. And the improvement, it won't be linear, because as an example, we're on the Class 398, the tram trains today. None of those are currently in service because they're still going through type testing and regulatory approval, which is a very long process. I wish it was faster. But you will then see them come in really very fast when they do, as quickly as possible, either at the back end of this year or at the beginning of next year.
And I think that's a good point to just touch upon that, because a lot of people will see these tram trains now in just outside the depot. You're parked up. Yeah. Why can't they get on the network? Yeah. And the truth is they've got to go through testing, driver training.
Yeah.
These things take a while.
We bought the trains. They've been brought into the UK. They now need to go through UK regulatory approval. And that is what is happening. It's a long period of time. And as I said, I wish it was faster, and it's an expensive process. But then they need to be safe. They need to be proven to be safe. They need to be proven to work with the infrastructure. And they'll be operating in the UK for a very long period of time. So actually, relatively speaking, it's a short period of time.
And So moving on from the new trains, we're on the 398, which is going to be run on the Metro. Where are we with the Metro project? Obviously, this is a key part of it.
So again, it's a good time for you to be asking me that question. So we're on the 398 train. The 398 train is itself parked in the depot. The depot is fully completed. That's in Taftswell.
Yeah.
And outside the depot, Taftswell train station is part of the Treherbert Aberdare Merthyr, part of the CVL network, all of which has been fully electrified for 3 or 4 months now. And if you were to go outside the depot now, you will see electric trains, 756s, going up and down the Treherbert Aberdare Merthyr lines. As of Monday next week, there will be 7 in passenger service every day, and we will rapidly grow those numbers up to 14 as quickly as we possibly can, and certainly all before the end of spring.
So I think the message of Pash is the Metro's happening now. It's just being ramped up.
Yeah, absolutely. The Metro is in effect already here.
Yeah. And obviously from when we first started talking about the plans with the Metro a few years back, it's probably gone a little bit over budget, and timescales have changed for different reasons. You know, what would we say about that?
So, well, number one, the Metro has gone a bit over budget. That's a matter of public record. Secondly, I'm not pleased about that. We've done everything that we possibly can to bring it in on budget. Thirdly, though, we have performed better than other infrastructure schemes in the UK, quite a bit better, in fact. And importantly, we have had to deal with COVID, a war in Ukraine, international inflation, and a whole series of other shocks that has made it more difficult to do international business, and it's put inflation up. And we've had to deal with all of that. And I think the teams that have worked all that through are to be congratulated for doing it and for getting us to where we are today.
Yeah, and they're the same reasons why there's been a change with some of the timescales.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and COVID was, I know it seems like we've moved out to COVID now, but when you're doing infrastructure projects such as this, it does have...
Well, COVID was a real big deal for us, wasn't it? Because one day everything was normal. The next day, people had to be 3 meters apart from everyone.
Yeah.
We had to double the number of vans we had on the network. We had to work out how people could co-design. We were meant to be having engineers coming from Switzerland, from Germany, from Spain. International travel got very, very difficult. So the same as the rest of the world had to deal with that.
Yeah.
We had to deal with that. The difference for the project team was they had to deal with that whilst building a very complex project.
And for TFW, we were still running the transport network in Wales and Borders while he was on there.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on from the Metro, I want to talk a little bit about innovation. In November, we had 3 UK firsts as a business. First one, pay as you go, tap in, tap out, the first outside of London to be using that technology. You know, that's a real big milestone for us and part of the Metro again.
Absolutely. So if we talk about tap in, tap out, obviously that's something that is core really to our proposition around the Metro, because the Metro is all about turn up and go, easy to use experience, minimizing customer pain points.
Yeah. And
tap in, tap out, as anyone who's been to London, or we can now say as anyone who travels around the South Wales Metro, is really super easy. All you need is a phone or a card and away you go. The team worked really hard to make this happen. We've got 95 stations as part of the network currently, and we will expand that.
Yeah.
And it's working well. So
yeah, and I think it's our fastest growing ticketing product.
It is, yes. And I expect it will grow a lot quicker as more and more people get to hear about it.
And then potentially look into the future to expand it to other places as well.
For sure, yes. I mean, our ambition would be to see the same technology as part of an integrated journey solution or integrated ticketing solution across all modes, across all parts of Wales.
One of the other really interesting innovative sort of projects we've been delivering is when we've been digging up the track to build and change the infrastructure for the Metro, we've been installing a full fibre internet network, which we can use to sell to businesses who can then sell to consumers, which we call in fibre or fibre. What do you want to say about that? The sort of
the fiber network hasn't really cost us anything because we needed to do it anyway. And on the rail, the fiber network is used as the backbone for the signaling system, in essence, and for some of the other safety critical systems. In essence, all we've done is to put a bigger pipe in that we needed to, which allows us to sell the balance of the network to other people. The real positive benefit for those other people is that we're providing broadband connectivity into some places that don't have enough connectivity. And the benefit for us will be we ought to be able to sell that on commercial terms, and that can come back into our network to be reinvested for the benefit of the people that we serve. So it's a win-win-win, really.
Yeah, and there's something nice about the metro connecting people physically, and then as TFW connecting people digitally.
Very good point, James. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the third of our UK first in last November was the introduction of our 756, the tri-mode engine. We're the first operator to introduce in the UK to passenger service. That's a key milestone in not just for TFW, but for the rail industry as well.
It absolutely is. So the metro is based on a premise of discontinuous or smart electrification, which in essence means you have some parts of the network with normal wires, some parts of the network with wires which are not live, and some parts of the network with no wires at all. And the train interacts with beacons on the track that go into its central control system and tells it whether to put the pantograph on the roof up and connect with the wires and draw current or not. It's been done in other parts of Europe, but not at the scale that we have done it. And therefore, this was one of the things that, people were quite worried about. We knew it would work, but we may have had to re-engineer a few things. The good news is it's pretty much proven to work out of the box. We had a couple of issues. And on the basis that it works on the 756s, it will also work on the 398s, the tram trains, which we sat on today, which use exactly the same technology and are made by the same company, Stadler.
And running them tri-modes has allowed us to change how we have built the metro with the raising of different bridges and infrastructure works.
The reason, obviously, for the discontinuous electrification, which I've conveniently left out, is that you do not need to raise so many bridges. The valleys are covered in road bridges and interconnectivity of different communities. You have to have what we describe as clearance, i.e. a certain gap between the top of the bridge and the wires that go underneath, and then a gap between the wires and the train that sit below it. And conventionally, you would either remove a bridge or you would lift it. That's very expensive and it's very disruptive for the communities around it. And we've avoided many of those interventions through this discontinuous approach, which has also allowed us to keep the price down.
Moving on to bus. Obviously, we've done a lot in rail. We've talked a lot about rail and the metro, and bus is part of the metro as well. Bus franchising, that's looking to begin in 2027 in Wales. Where are we with that? It is early days with a lot of it from what the customers see, but where are we with that?
So just briefly, bus franchising is the ability or the legal requirement to, in Wales, set out a network, set out a series of fares that buses will operate on. So this provides us with the opportunity to build a transport network that is linked up across different modes of travel in a way that the timetables make sense, the networks make sense, and the ticketing and pricing structure makes sense. In terms of where we are, we need to wait for the legislation to go through before we can do this. So that's going to mean it's 2027 before we are seeing any area of Wales being franchised. And then the plan is that we franchise across Wales in phases, with the Southwest going first. What we're doing at the minute is to work with local authorities, with groups of local authorities at a regional level, and with operators to work out what the networks will look like, work out what the fleets will look like, and work out how the depots and the maintenance and the teams who will drive the buses will operate and how and where they will operate from. And we're most significantly advanced on the Southwest on that because the Southwest will be going first. So lots of work going on, but lots more to do.
Obviously, we've evolved now as an organisation. We're just over 6 years old since we were launched publicly. At that time, mainly focused on rail. Is there lessons from what we're doing in rail that we can apply to the bus industry in Wales?
I'm sure there's lots of lessons that we can apply, both technical, financial, planning. But I guess the one that immediately comes to mind is thinking about the promise we make to customers and how we make that promise, and recognizing the fact that whilst we might think things are moving very fast on rail because we're in it and we're doing it all the time, to the customer who sees nothing happening maybe for 18 months, that's very frustrating.
Yeah.
So we need to think about how we describe the changes that are going to be happening on bus in a way that makes sense
to the customer. Yeah. And that brings us on nicely to talk a little bit about multimodal. It's a bit of a buzzword that goes around at the moment, especially in TfW, and creating what we've called the T network, creating a multimodal network that integrates rail and bus. To explain it to someone quite simply, what is a multimodal network? What does that look like to the customer?
I mean, you said train and bus. I would say train, bus, walking, cycling, car.
All modes, basically.
Yeah, any mode you can think of.
Yeah.
Probably some that I can't think of right now, because there will be many, many journeys that a person will take in their life, which will require the use of more than one mode.
Yeah.
What do we mean by mode? We mean a different type of vehicle, basically.
Yeah.
And our mission, if you like, is to make it easy to make those journeys in a connected way through one mechanism with a network that makes sense, with a timetable that makes sense, and with a fare structure that makes sense. So you, in effect, you shouldn't need to worry about what mode you're on. Either you'll be stood up or you'll be sat down, and you'll go from where you start to where you finish, and it should be seamless. That's
one
the
journey,
idea.
yeah,
Absolutely.
And I think it's the one network, one timetable, one ticket. So that's the approach with it. And we have started to do that in some areas with rail, bus, and integrated ticketing. How far away do you think we are? That's the vision, to perhaps achieving that in Wales.
So in reality, that's going to take a while. And I think we will always be honing it and trying to improve it. But the first big change in that, I guess, will be in about 4 to 5 years' time, when we see franchising on bus beginning to bed in, which will then allow us to do the integrated ticketing product that we were talking about earlier.
If we move on, quick chat about Great British Railways. There's a lot being talked about with the UK government now in this space. What impact do you think that's going to have on us at TfW? So
the impact on TfW is not yet clear, and it runs from basically having no change at all, and GBR being a rebranded Network Rail in Wales, through to the opportunity to partner with a GBR Cymru or a GBR Wales, where we would hope that we could remove some of the arguably artificial barriers that there are currently between TfW and Network Rail, artificial legal barriers, which drive lots of cost for no benefit for the customer. So we're currently working with Network Rail to explore exactly what that might look like. But what I can say is that the track will remain the responsibility of GBR for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And the trains will continue to be operated by Transport for Wales. The track, of course, on the CVL is different.
I was going to say it's different to CVL, yeah.
The challenge is, what can we do in the middle of those two things to make it much more efficient? And that's what we're working on together. And to the extent that there's an opportunity in GBR, and I think that there ought to be one, that's where the opportunity is. And that's what we're working on currently with Network Rail.
Yeah. And what's the sort of timescales around that? It's longer term.
It's longer term.
Yeah.
However, any of the opportunities that are there in, say, 3 years' time, the next question will be, why can't we have them now? So we will explore whether we can do and have any of the benefits that GBR might offer now rather than waiting.
And you touched upon the CVL. Are there some lessons we've learned from CVL, what we're doing there, that we can apply to that model, or is it different?
I think there are, yes, in terms of trying to be more vertically integrated and thinking about the cost lines of running the entire railway rather than just part of the railway.
Yeah.
But I guess if we can pull off what we're talking about with GBR, we can learn from GBR and we can learn from CVL, and we can have the best of both worlds.
6 years in, Jim. So we're just over 6 years in since we, a bit longer for you, but there's a lot going on. It's a lot's changed in the world since then as well, as you touched upon COVID. What are you most proud of? What are you most proud of as the chief exec and leading us in what we've achieved so far?
So I think the biggest thing is the team that work here, who have dealt with a whole series of very difficult things that we talked about, dealt with COVID, ran the services through COVID, continued to build the Metro through some very difficult international engagement times. Our frontline teams who worked with a very aging rail fleet, but kept it going and dealt with sometimes some quite overcrowded units as a consequence. And the fact that they're still here now and able to see the benefit of all of their very hard work over a number of years. Yeah. And that benefit is now very visible. And I guess it's the fact that we've stuck with the plan, or they have stuck with the plan, and that they have delivered that.
And seen starting to see lots of the changes
now. Yeah.
And then on the back end there, what are the biggest challenges? What do you think the biggest challenge? COVID probably being one of them, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess the pace and the quantity of change that we have had to implement right across the network all at the same time, that's been the headline challenge. So because of the way that the rail system was set up in the past, we inherited the oldest rolling stock in the UK, with really the need for nearly all of it to be switched out and changed, and building the Metro at the same time. Just the difficulty of doing all of that at the same time and taking our customer base and the line side neighbours with us. I think that's been the biggest challenge. But again, I think the team have worked really hard to get us through that.
Because it is the introduction of 4 different types of new trains. You're not just introducing one model. There's 4 different. So there's so much change going on. Yeah. I think sometimes people don't appreciate the level of the complexity of that change.
I quite agree. Yeah.
While you're building the Metro as well. What are the lessons you take from that, or some of the learning points, or things you're probably looking back now that you've sort of learned if you were doing it again?
The biggest one is, I guess, the optimism of particularly the rail industry. So, and I guess that's not a bad thing, is it? Optimism in anyone is always a good thing.
Yeah.
But the rail industry is always optimistic about everything, and then it is always more complicated than
delivering
what it was, and delivering it is always more difficult. So, to be fair, we were corporately aware of that, and we have always hunted out or tried to hunt out the potential problems. But with the amount of change that we've seen and the amount of different technologies that we have introduced, I think that we are now very experienced in understanding what that can look like.
Yeah.
And therefore would probably be even better about working out some of the things that might go wrong before they went.
Yeah. And is that a lot to do with as well now that when we first started, we were promising this change and the new and people are waiting for something. But now once you start to deliver it, it almost becomes you've got something in the bank that people can believe is coming.
Yeah. So
there's a lot of anticipation with change.
Obviously it's a lot easier now.
Yeah.
It's equally easier to deliver things now because we, in the main, have done most of the technically difficult challenging things on the railway.
Yeah.
Lots of other stuff to come yet.
Yeah.
We've got, a tram project from Cardiff Central to Cardiff Bay.
Yeah. Crossrail.
We've got absolutely Crossrail. We've
Yeah.
got significant aspirations around North Wales Metro. There will be significant challenges around things like hydrogen on hydrogen buses.
Yeah.
So learning the lessons from the past as we do that be really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I was to ask you now to look into the future, we've talked a little bit of the past, the last 6 years, you know, what we've achieved, what we've, what challenges, obstacles we've come up against. Looking into the future, if I was to say, you know, in the next 6 years, we get to 2030, what would you want the public transport network to look like in Wales?
Well, to start with, we want, as I said earlier, we want it to be reliable. We want it to do the things that it says it's going to do. We want it to be easy to use, and we want people to trust it as a basic. But more than that, I think we want it to be something that allows for people to be connected to their employment, to be connected to each other. And we want to plan for the future before we get to the future. So what do I mean by that? I think the biggest challenge will be if we are successful, and the numbers would suggest that's beginning to happen, it won't be that long before the additional capacity that we have put on is full up. If you follow, because of the length of time it takes to introduce new capacity, we need to be thinking about that in the next couple of years and deciding what we're going to do in the next couple of years. So I think that's the biggest opportunity and challenge, actually.
So you almost become a victim of success because you put on all these new trains.
And then the next question will be, why is all your service full up? Now, it's very interesting. If you had a restaurant that was full up and you had to book 6 months in advance, that would be a success.
Yeah.
I understand why that is, and I understand why it's different for public transport. But success will breed failure if you're not careful. So we need to plan and be ahead of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And bus could play a part in that as well.
Well, bus will be exactly the same, yeah.
We actually put a poll out on Instagram, on social media, because we do a lot of interacting with our customers on there to ask if they got any questions. So if you don't mind, we've got 3 that they've come in on social media to ask you. The first one is, I think you're doing a great job. So that's good.
Did you say that one?
It was me. I think you're doing a great job. I think if you offered tours of Taffs, well, you'd make money where we are today. What would you say to that one?
So we are very keen to show people what we're doing, show people around, show the community. And in fact, we have been taking groups of people around the Taffs Well Depot. And if that is of interest to groups, I'm sure that can be facilitated. And I'm sure that
I think it's plans to do it in the future.
Someone can put some link somewhere as I'm speaking for who they should contact.
Yeah, I think there's plans to do more of that in the future, yeah. Second question, when are the tram trains going to start running on the CVL or Valley lines?
So the tram trains, such as we are on now, will start running as soon as we can possibly get them approved for running.
Yeah.
Either that will be later this year or very early next year. That sounds like quite a long time, but we will have to get regulatory approval and then train all of our drivers. So that's the gap.
It's worth noting that these are the last batch of trains. In the meantime, we've got all the other new trains and more being introduced to the network. And then the last one, if the funds were available, would TfW ever consider a high-speed line across Wales?
So TfW needs to be an evidence-based organisation that does things that are right for the population of Wales and the borders and our customer base. And if that was what the evidence said was needed and the funds were available, of course, we'd consider anything.
And that's perhaps a part of the business that doesn't get as much publicity as the work we do, the planning for Welsh Government, the transport plan, and understanding what is needed as well for Wales.
Yeah, and so as a big part of I say a big part of our organisation, a big part of our mandate, it's quite a small number of people, is focused on understanding future travel trends, future travel needs, engineering opportunities, technological opportunities, and then engaging with government and funders to explore what in fact is required of us.
That's it, James. That's it to the questions. Anything else you'd want to add, want to say?
I don't think so, no. Excellent interviewer you've been.
Thank you. Will you come back on?
I won't have a choice, will I? Yes.
Thanks for coming on, James.
Cheers.
Great.
Thanks.